The point of situation behavior impact is you take away from saying directly, you screwed up this report, and instead you're leading them through the situation, the behavior, and the impact. Ego is the part of us that is judged by others. So pretty much anytime you feel judged, that is your ego responding and defending you. He also said, which I agree with, the ego developed for the sole reason of protecting you. It's a protective mechanism. So I'll talk a lot about this in a minute, but when we feel pain, emotional pain, our ego jumps in to keep us safe and comfy and warm. And what it does, in his words, which I love, our ego goes to our rational mind and says, we're going to do some really selective reasoning. And this is what happens when people rationalize their actions. They're going to do something evil, awful, stupid, bad, mean, selfish. They don't want to see themselves as evil, bad, stupid, mean, selfish. And so they have to rationalize. And so the ego goes to their mind and says, it's okay, I've got a story for this. And it makes up whatever tenuous concoction of nonsense it needs to, so that the person can say, oh, no. When I stabbed him with a fork, it was for his own good. It had to happen. And that's what our mind is really good at doing, because it helps us feel good. And we're very good at looking out for number one. When we talk about dealing with ego at work, I have to be careful. Ego comes out anytime the ego is the part of us that's judged by others. So anytime someone feels judged or threatened, unless they're self-aware or very tolerant of emotional pain, they're going to come out, they're going to have ego come up, and they're going to tend to try and dislocate that. It's why people make excuses at work. It's very hard to look your boss or look your coworkers straight in the eye and say, I know I said I'd get that done last night, but I decided to pop a cold one and watch TV or to Netflix and chill. It's a lot easier to say anything else because we can't deal with that emotional pain. So let's see, at work, the same thing happens. Someone is late on a deadline, and then you come and you don't know they're late on a deadline. Here's a real scenario. We'll use me. I'm late on something. Somebody comes to me and says, Ethan, can you do this other thing today? I will lash out at them, or I'll just reject it. I'll say I can't. Or maybe I explain why. I can't do that. I'm working on something else. That's rational. But let's say it's my boss and he's pressing on me for something. I may not feel comfortable telling him I can't do what you're asking. I need to do this other thing that also has to happen that maybe you also want. So instead, I will start coming up with excuses, or I will attack the work. You move from responding to the problem, which is, hey, I can't do both things you're asking for, to resisting the work. So you change to saying, this isn't really important. And you get into an argument about the importance, when the real issue is you can't do both things and you feel bad about that. Or you get into, if it's a coworker or somebody you don't like, or even just you're in a bad mood, you get into attacking the person. And you say, isn't that really your job? Or shouldn't you give that to somebody else? Or best, because I don't want to be in a fight with you either, that's painful, I say, hey, shouldn't you dump that on Sarah? Or shouldn't you dump that on Fred? And so I push it off. This is what ego does. I don't want to have the discussion, I can't do everything. Instead, I push it. And T Weirdos nailed this. I was going to get to this point. People do this without realizing it. In other words, I'm describing these scenarios and walking you through what's really going on. But people under pressure don't always realize why they're under pressure or that they are under pressure. Metamyth, thanks for the follow. They don't realize why they're in pain. And they don't realize that they're medicating the pain. And the place this matters for the audience is you can see very irrational behavior in the workplace that is coming from people medicating their pain and avoiding it, but they don't necessarily even know. And by the way, everyone does this. When I'm tired, if you catch me in the wrong mood, I will lash out. And I don't mean to, and it does make me a jerk. And I'm not saying it's right, but if you catch me under the wrong mode, everyone is short with people. I'm medicating the fact that I'm tired and overwhelmed. That's my internal state you can't see. And you see this all the time. All of us have said to someone, wow, did you get up on the wrong side of the bed this morning? And Shadow says she needs her coffee for sure. This is the whole joke about coffee in the morning. Why is that a meme? It's a meme because when people aren't fully awake, they're more interested, like when you're asking them to think hard or do something right in the morning, they're not feeling up to it. But instead of saying, you know what, I'm kind of dragging ass right now, I'm not up to it, they can be snippy. And that's ego in pain. It's minor pain. It's not like the guy hitting someone over the car, but that's what it is. The next point I want to make, by the way, not all feedback you get that's negative and not all resistance you get to your plans at work is necessarily ego. And in fact, be self-aware. If you find yourself snapping at people and resisting all kinds of feedback and requests, there is ego involved, but it's probably your own. The best way, and we're going to talk about what you can do with ego at work, lesson number 1 in understanding ego at work is understanding your own ego and how your own ego gets in the way of things. That said, I want to talk about, okay, I've given you all the symptoms of ego and some stories about ego. I have a couple more I can tell. What the hell do you do about it? Well, the first thing is you have to try to recognize and understand. Recognize first, and if you can, understand what is causing the person that you're struggling with. What is causing that person to be in pain? And what is causing them, him or her, to react this way? You can't always figure it out, but trying to get some sense of, is this person reacting normally or abnormally? Do they have a truly rational objection, or are they basically giving me a stonewall? And this is hard to figure out, and I'm not going to go into all the ways to figure it out. But if someone seems to be irrational, you look for pain in their life. You look for, are they overworked? Is your request difficult for them? Is it difficult for their skill set? Is it difficult for their schedule? Is it difficult for their group, their budget? Any of these things can cause them to react. I was recently in a situation with my own leadership where I could see that something I needed that was pretty rational was hard for one of the bosses above me for budgetary reasons. And that was leading him to really question the plans much more than usual. And I figured out, yes, the questions on the surface are reasonable, but part of the real objection is your budget is a pain in my overall budget. And if I can just find enough reasons to say no, whether they're rational or not, my problem, his problem with the budget gets better. And so I realized, I've got to deal with not only the superficial questions, but what do I do? What can I do to change his budget situation or to get myself out of that locker, that problem? So, okay, Once you recognize something's wrong with a person, they're struggling, the next thing is empathize with it. Realize we've all had bad days and we've all been in bad situations. The person may be a complete jerk, but we've all done jerky things. And so you can look at it and be somewhat empathetic to their situation and not make it worse. The next thing is really hard. Usually when someone in an ego situation pushes back on you, that person now is threatening your ego. So like in that situation, the leader above me was threatening effectively the budget of one of my projects. Well, what do? Right? He's threatening one of my projects. Well, one of the things I can do is let my ego respond to that. I can get scared. I can get hurt, worried. You're being irrational. And now my ego wants to launch into counterattacks to protect me. This is where things go south, and that's why it's important to get good at recognizing your own ego. The Buddhists call this being able to sit with your own discomfort. So you are under attack. The person is denying your project, they're denying your promotion, they're giving you more work, they're telling you they won't help you. That's threatening you because you have something you're trying to get done at work. If you then let your ego say, oh, he's bad. Like, it's not just he or she is under pressure. He or she is a bad person, and I'm going to counterattack. All of this is usually subconscious. You end up in a spiral of escalation because then I launch an attack back. Maybe with my boss, I say, that's not reasonable, blah, blah, blah. Well, then he says, well, you're overreacting. You don't know, and I'm not overreacting, and you're in a death spiral. You can't get into that. You must avoid it. So the last thing you do is if you can figure out what's bugging them, then you try and work around it. He had a budget problem, so I try and help with the budget problem. Or I try and get myself into separate consideration where when he's thinking about what I'm proposing, he's not thinking about his overall budget problem. The point is recognizing the situation. Often the best question is, would it be better if we discuss this another time? Another thing is take an ally, take witnesses. Remember, I told the story at the beginning of the stream of the guy punching the other driver and getting ready to punch the woman who called him out on it. But there were too many witnesses. Witnesses make it much harder because if I start behaving like an ass, no matter what form that takes, too many witnesses, and I realize I'm not going to get away with it. So, awesome. All right. So let's jump into questions. Can a coworker be super busy, yet you interpret their busyness as them having a strong ego? How do you conclude if a coworker truly has a strong ego, or in reality they are just super busy? I don't think this has a complex answer. If someone is usually accommodating but seems busy, they probably are. If they're busy and it's useful work, they probably are someone who gets a lot done. And so if someone is getting a lot done, a lot of valuable things done, they're probably very busy. If someone doesn't seem very busy to you ever, and they don't get much done, but they're always blowing you off or otherwise pushing you away, then I think there's something else going on. One of the things about ego, obviously, is figuring out what's going on with another human being requires, Chalupa Whale says, always assume good intent is what I go with. Hey, Jay Chosen. You need to assume good intent, but you also need to get to know people. Human interaction is very hard to do what we call a cold read. Cold read is where you've just met someone, you've never seen how they interact. Their interactions seem inappropriate. They seem harsh, they seem short, they seem whatever. but you don't know them. It's very hard to tell style from intent early. But with a coworker here who seems to be super busy, I don't know, are they producing anything? Are they a top performer? They might be really busy. Yes, Furuki, this is a great quote. You've started it. You said, don't attribute to malice. I specifically believe the full thing I would say as I phrase that quote is, don't attribute to malice when there's any other explanation. Again, most people aren't malicious. You may run into them, but most people are selfish, inconsiderate, tired, overworked. There's a whole list of things they may be. They're usually just interested in their life going more smoothly. It's that simple. Most people want to have an easy, great life. And when you think about it, you do too. I want to have an easy, great life. And each person has some amount of motive to do a good job. And that varies. Some people, sadly, couldn't give a shit. If they could do nothing and get paid, that would be fantastic. And some people really want to earn every dollar. And they have an internal motivation to be their best, regardless of how much they like the work or the coworkers or whatever. And I really admire those people. Yeah, Jay Tozen says, I like accomplishing big tasks. So I don't know if Jay is male or female, but he or she likes doing work. So when you come to someone like that with a request, they have an internal motivation to try to make it to try to make it happen. But if they have something else going on in their life, that motivation is only so strong. Classic example. Years ago, I got divorced. If you work long enough, you'll work with all kinds of people who go through divorces or illnesses. When that was on my mind, I had a lot on my mind. And I was in a lot of personal, emotional discomfort. So when someone asked me to do more work, I may or may not have been interested. And my interest in work is only so strong when I have something else on my mind. And if you don't believe this, try asking someone to hang around work when they've just learned their kid's been in a car accident. Try telling them that a report is really important when they're ill. It doesn't work because they have other priorities. What's a good way to bring up or criticize something that will directly hurt someone's ego as it's their responsibility? Well, there's a few things there. A good way is, first, if you've never talked to them before, jumping straight into a criticism is going to be hard. The more you have a relationship, the better. The second thing to do is don't bring it up in public. Egos get threatened more in public because if you're going to tell me something bad, that's hard for me to accept. If you're going to tell me something bad in front of an audience, that's harder for me to accept. And if you're going to tell me something bad in front of somebody who's important to me, like my boss or my wife, it's the hardest. So there's a good rule generally which says praise in public, criticize in private. There are exceptions to this rule, but that is a good general rule. So take the person aside, buy them a cup of coffee, whatever, a beer. Ask them, say, hey, I'd like to talk to you. Is there a good time for that? Get a good time for it. Don't try and like catch them when they're under other stress, like, oh, I'm late for a meeting. It's not the best time. And then there's a type of feedback called SBI, Situation Behavior Impact. And what you do is you reframe the problem as, here is a situation. We were in this meeting, or your team gave my team the TPS report. And then the behavior was the TPS report had several errors in it. The impact, thank you, Hydrate Right Now, for the sub with Twitch Prime. The impact of the errors on my team was blah, blah, blah. The point of situation behavior impact is you take away from saying directly, you screwed up this report, And instead, you're leading them through the situation, the behavior, and the impact. And that's a great way to lead people to feedback. The other way to do this is to try to ask questions, and not super leading questions. Like a bad question is, so the report was wrong. Are you dumb or did you just rush it? Not an honest question. A different question, though, that you can use is, hey, the report, I noticed that there were some problems in the report. Those impacted my team. I'm wondering, how could I help prevent them? Or is there something you need to get the report to be more accurate? Ojo 4 says there's being direct and there's being rude. Direct is good. I like direct. A lot of people don't, though. What are some strategies to use for removing some of the ego from the equation and redirecting the focus on the work? Good question. As I said earlier, first, keep your own ego out of it. And you have to not just keep your ego under control, you have to really mean it. So that requires you to be empathetic with the other person. In other words, realize this person is struggling. I can either get pissed or I can get effective. And to be effective, I have to have empathy for the fact that something is wrong in their life. I may not be able to fix that, but I can at least have empathy that they're in a bad place. And the reason that matters is the human animal is incredibly good at detecting whether you're sincere or manipulative. It's body language, it's tone, it's eye contact, it's all kinds of things. So first thing is stay calm and be friendly. You can still be assertive while being calm and friendly. Second, the second thing you need to do is take a pause. Slow things down. Do not get into rapid fire exchanges because you don't have time to think and they don't have time to think. Ask them, is this a good time to keep discussing this, or should we maybe take a break? Is one question. Ask, is there something bigger going on here that you need help with? Ask, is there something about this problem I don't understand? It seems like you're having trouble considering my request. Is there some context for why that is? And the value of these questions is often the person who's lashing out isn't doing it consciously, or who's resisting. I use the words lashing out. They may be resisting, they may be pointing you elsewhere, they may be shifting responsibility. The person who's not engaging with you, find out why and realize they may not know why. And so help them figure out what the hell they're doing. Now along here, I get it. You may think, when did I sign up to be a counselor in order to get work done at work? Well, you decided to interact with other humans, and interacting with other humans is hard and has overhead. You can either get mad or you can be effective. This is part of building your set of skills. Other people have ego, and all of us bring our problems to work. You bring your problems to work, I bring my problems to work. When we get together, it's a miracle we don't kill each other. Given that, I have to get good at helping you through not all your problems, but helping you realize, oh, okay, honestly, I'm just feeling really overworked. If someone says that to you, or honestly, I don't think we have the budget for that, or I don't think we have the head count for that, or I don't think my boss is going to approve that. Now you know the problem, and you say, well, how could I help you get your boss's approval? Or under a question my boss taught me is, what would have to be true in order blah? And this question is great because you can actually ask it of almost anything absurd and people will walk with you. And you say, so what would have to be true for you to want to give me your house? Now, this question sounds impossible, right? Like, no one would want to give you their house. But actually, everyone can answer the question, what would have to be true? Well, I'd have to be independently wealthy and not need it anymore. Oh, okay. Well, what is independently wealthy to you? I've used an impractical example in terms of hyperbole to make the point, but you can get people talking about what would have to be true. What would have to be true for you to take on this project? Well, we need more headcount. We need more of this, more of that. Well, okay, let's talk about that. Why do you need more headcount? Why? Like, I'm not doubting you. What's the more headcount for? Can you help me justify that? What's the more budget for? That's how you remove some of the ego from the equation. Is you specifically, I said earlier, the Devon Nash stream with Dr. Kanagia, ego was defined as the part of us. Let me get this quote up. Ego is the part of us that is judged by others. Whatever is causing the person to feel judgment, you have to remove. You have to get away from their ego feeling threatened, so they need to defend it. And so the strategy is figure out how to stop threatening their ego. Be non-threatening. Be an ally. Because remember, if they want to look good in their boss, tell them how you can help them look good in front of their boss. If they want to work less, tell them how you can help them work less. Do this project now and it'll be streamlined later, whatever the answer is. My manager feels attacked when he receives feedback and has said as much. Well, that's some self-awareness. How can I help him feel safe to receive concerns? Great question. First, you're lucky that your manager can at least admit that. What I would do is I would go talk to your manager sometime when you have no feedback to give him. In other words, I'd take him out for a beer and say, hey, remember a couple weeks ago when you told me you feel threatened when you receive feedback? I don't want you to feel threatened. I don't want you to feel attacked. But sometimes we do have to give you feedback. How can we do that? And then you can always make suggestions. Do you like it better in writing? I know someone who told me, hey, I'm not very good at responding to hard topics on the fly. I need time to process. And I talked earlier about personality tests, and I didn't get to the point there, so I'm going to go back to it. It was somebody brought up that being direct is good, and I generally agree, but I'm a direct person. For some personalities, being too direct feels threatening because they feel that they must respond to that right away. The same thing is true for feedback. People need processing time. Some people like me, we're ready to go. You can say anything to us and we'll fight, we'll flight, we'll process it, we'll engage you and say, really, you think I'm a complete idiot? That's interesting. What has led you to that conclusion? As opposed to getting upset, we're like, that's real unique. You think I should be tarred and feathered. Huh, where did you come up with that? Other people don't feel that way and they can't respond that way. And by the way, you can make me angry in other ways. Those just aren't them. What you need to do then in this case, what I would do that I think is great, is ask them, what is your way of taking this? And if they've taken one of these personality tests, if you know that, because a lot of companies do them all, say, hey, I know you took MBTI. What's your type? Or how does your type handle this? If they haven't taken any of those tests, you say, look, I want to work with your style. What is your style? Everybody can tell you what their style is or what they think it is. You can also ask others, hey, is there anyone in our group who's ever given our manager feedback in some way that's worked? Somebody probably has. They have a different personality. They have a different relationship. So you just do a little investigation. How does this person accept feedback? So your question was, how can I help him feel safe to receive concerns? Two things. Present the concerns in a way that works for him. And second, try to let him know in advance, hey, I know you feel attacked by this. I'm not attacking you. I'm trying to share something for our group's good, or whatever the thing is. I'm trying to help you be more effective. Turn it into something positive. Now, I want to be clear for every piece of advice I've given tonight. The advice will work most of the time for most rational people. People are difficult, ornery beasts, myself included, everyone included. No human interaction is guaranteed to go perfectly all the time. So when you're dealing with ego, you're going to have problems. So do your best and expect good, but realize when you're trying to tease out people's egos, you're already in a bad situation and it's imperfect. The point that comes from the Myers-Briggs and knowing these that applies to ego is understanding what kind of feedback or interaction can work for another person. One of the ways you can threaten someone's ego is if you're interacting with them in a way that's painful for them, they will not react as well. Let's really simplify this. If you're an introvert and I put you in a room of strangers and try to ask you, go work the card and go work the room, collect business cards and make sales for our product, I'm threatening that person's ego because I've given them a task they're going to hate. Conversely, if I take an extrovert and I say, I need you to work on this project totally alone. I can't have you disturb anyone else in our group. I need you to do this entirely by yourself. The extrovert might start okay, but 10 minutes later or an hour later, they're going to be hating it. And I'm going to start getting all the reasons why they can't do it, and they're not going to follow through. There's confidence and there's egotism. If everything you say in an interview is I this, I that, that's not going to go as well as conveying passion, interest, and ability. I think those are very positive traits, and you can lean into what you have done as long as you're not making outrageous claims and you can back it up and you're not saying I did this when clearly it took a team. I think interviews are situational, but people are expecting you to sell yourself a little bit. And I would lean on the side of saying more rather than less and stronger. And particularly, by the way, I would advise women to do this. And the reason I would advise women is that females, as a generalization, as a group in studies, are less likely to claim responsibility and more likely to deprecate their own abilities. So there is some evidence that that hurts them in interviews and certainly in promotions, as well as what jobs they choose to apply for. I think interviews are a place for confidence. I've said before in how to win an interview or how to do well in an interview. The number 1 and 2 things that are common across all interviews is passion, appearance, and enthusiasm. And enthusiasm is very close to passion. So I would go ahead and sell those. And I would just be careful not to make obviously egotistical claims. I am the best programmer, not good. Let me tell you about some of the hard things I've been able to solve as a developer. Fantastic. I had the privilege of working on a really challenging bridge design. Can I show you our final results in my portfolio? Fantastic. Oh yeah, it was because of me we won the Poughkeepsie Bridge competition. Not fantastic. And it's the same data. You may have won because of your architectural work. Can I show it to you is way better. Under what circumstances would maintaining an ego be beneficial, if any? Ego is a protective mechanism. So one place is, I'm not sure if it's maintaining ego, but false criticism. There are plenty of people who will attack you for what you do. They will attack you. I'm going to move the camera angle just a little here. They will attack you for doing wrong. For doing right, for doing no wrong. I'm not a psychologist, so I can't completely answer this. But under what circumstances would maintaining ego be beneficial? You need to have confidence. And remember, ego is what makes you feel judged, is what comes out when you feel judged. If someone is judging you, having an ego that can be confident and say, hey, thank you for that input. I don't agree, but my self-worth either way is not based only on your opinion, is part of being able. That's valuable. There's value in having your self-worth be separate, or at least not completely based on other people's assessments. Now, some people would say it should be based not at all on other people's assessments. You may listen to their assessment for data, but you're not basing your self-worth on their assessment. Hi, this is Ethan Evans. Thank you for watching. I hope you've gotten a lot out of today's show. Please click the bell icon to follow us on YouTube, join us on Twitch, or join our Discord channel for our ongoing community discussions.